Islander who faked his own death and assumed a new identity.
Fled the country, was caught in a hospital in Scotland, then extradited back here to Utah in January.
Our lives have been interrupted. We'd like privacy, and I would like to go back to being a normal husband.
I find and conclude that the state has met its burden and has presented evidence sufficient to establish probable cause to believe that the crime charged in the information was committed, and it was committed by this defendant.
We sustain a lot of injuries throughout our life. Like, for example, me, a couple of days ago, you might not even notice, but I've got some iodine still around my eye because I wear contacts. Not all the time. Sometimes, like usually when I go out and stuff, so like once a year. And when I put them in, I fell asleep with them on, which is the worst thing you could ever do in your entire life, by the way. This one, I managed to scoop out straight away, but this one was so wedged into my eye, I was basically going to pull my own eye out before I lost the contact lens. And then you do the whole thing where you start looking up online, you know, like, ooh, what are the side effects to getting a contact stuck in? And then you read the worst things imaginable, like you're going to die of asphyxiation within 5 minutes. And also, if you try and pull the contact off, it might take half of your cornea with it. So I basically had to go up to A&E, wait around 3 hours for a guy to numb my eye and then remove it with a Q-tip. It was really straightforward, and I think it's one of those things that's really annoying because you know that you could easily sort it out yourself. Like, I've slept with contact lenses in before, but that was bad. Now, how does that little story fill into what I'm talking about today? Because someone has recently tried to fake their death and flee the country. Again, it all comes together. Now, I want to introduce the protagonist to today's story, Nicholas Rossi. Now, he's gone by a lot of different names, like, for example, Arthur Knight, Arthur Brown. This guy, if you've seen a picture of him before, most likely because a couple of months ago, Critical made a video, you know, just doing a deep dive on how this guy lies at every possible chance he can get. He's basically like an American who's lying, saying that he's British, having one of the worst accents imaginable.
We were once a normal family, but thanks to the media, our lives have been interrupted.
No one cared who I was till I put on the mask.
But recently, since Critical's video came out, there's actually been a fair amount of updates on this guy. Now, going on his Wikipedia article, because apparently he's that famous, he deserves his own Wikipedia article, even though I, myself, still don't have a Wikipedia article. You've got other names like Nicholas Alaverdane Rossi, Nicholas Edward Rossi, Nicholas Avalerdane Rossi, Nick Allen, which is just, that one's a little bit basic, but fair enough. Nicholas Brown Nice, Arthur Brown, Arthur Knight. So he seems to do a thing whenever the authorities are about to catch up with him. He'll change his name, but he won't change it to something completely new. He'll just like swap two of the names around, like it's basically playing a game of Guess Who. Now, what's the crime that Rossi's accused of? What has he done to basically, you know, change identity more than Agent 47 every 5 minutes? Well, in 2008, he was put on the radar as a sex offender for indecent exposure, which I assume is basically the equivalent of like going into your Pip-Boy in Fallout and just unequipping all your clothes straight away. Now, he wanted to get a retrial, but apparently used fabricated evidence that was debunked as basically being accurate, and the judge saw right through it and basically just shooed him away. Later, in 2008, Alaverdane, under the name Nicholas Rossi, was convicted of public indecency and sexual imposition for the incident at Sinclair Community College and was required to register as a sex offender. He filed a motion for a retrial based on a newly surfaced MySpace post. You can tell that this is old. Like, we're going back to MySpace days. This is a prehistoric story. A MySpace post allegedly written by the victim, which claimed that she had lied about the incident. In an evidentiary hearing in February the 8th, 2011, a computer forensics expert testified with 90% certainty that the post had been altered or fabricated entirely. The motion for retrial was dismissed by the reviewing judge. So what people seem to think is he went to the extent of LARPing as the woman who filed the complaint originally, basically saying, oh no guys, I had a bit too much to drink. Nothing actually transpired, I promise. Now, I love to be a little bit of a Reddit detective. And what a lot of Reddit detectives do when they see someone being bad online, they instantly jump to their childhood. They wait for that moment. They wait for when Jack was pushed into the vat of acid and he turned into the Joker. You know, a lot of people always say that people end up the way they are because of, you know, nurture, not nature. And a lot of that can be due to upbringing. I'm not saying that's everyone, obviously, but like there is nothing on this guy. Absolutely nothing. The only thing we do know is he was diagnosed with narcissistic personality personality disorder. So on top of that as well, a lot of people have speculated, basically saying that he just wants people to feel sorry for him. Early in his life, he was diagnosed with behavioral and mental health issues. His stepfather, David Rossi, stated he just wouldn't listen in school. He hit the mother, hit the grandmother all the time, hit his siblings. I used to have to hold him down and he'd be spitting at me. And as a result, he was placed in psychiatric care at Butler Hospital and later Bradley Hospital. There, doctors diagnosed him with narcissistic personality disorder and attention deficit disorder. After being discharged from a treatment program, he briefly went back to his family. So that was a while ago, not really much happened. But then fast forward to Utah in 2017. Now, for some reason, Utah started to do a lot of back testing on their untested sexual assault kits that they've had backlogged for whatever reason. And one of these untested kits had Rossi's DNA on it. So that was basically linking him to that sexual assault case all the way back in 2008. In 2017, Utah investigators began processing a backlog of untested sexual assault kits. In 2018, one of the Utah kits, originally from 2008, was revealed to match Nicholas Elevadene's DNA from an investigation of the 2008 Ohio sexual assault. A sealed arrest warrant for Rossi Elevadene was issued in September 2020. So the timeline here gets a little bit cluttered, but in around 2020, Rossi actually came out himself and said that he had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is basically a kind of cancer in your lymph nodes. Now, this was around January, and he basically started to go around and ask media outlets to, you know, spread his story for him, which again, a lot of detractors were saying that that was part of his narcissistic personality disorder, you know, that constant obsession and need to have your face all over TV, you know, just be a constant media presence. But unfortunately, that didn't last long because in February, he actually passed away and was cremated. In January 2020, Elevadene reported that he had been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma. He provided this information to a number of media organizations. The Providence Journal later stated that Elevadene insisted that they report his illness. A person claiming to be Elevadene's widow later stated that his illness had lasted for months and included heart disease and heart attacks. According to his family and his obituary, Elevadene succumbed to the disease on February 29th, 2020. The person claiming to be his widow said that Elevadene would be cremated and his remains scattered at sea. She refused to provide copies of Elevadene's death certificate to the Providence Journal. Now, again, that sounds like a pretty sad story. You know, you could argue that the guy had a rough childhood. He, you know, might have been a little bit narcissistic, but if he genuinely was dying, I mean, I don't really see a problem with him getting as much media coverage as possible. But 5 months after his death, a lot of people started to speculate, did he actually fall off? Did he actually fall off, or is this all a big bit? So there was a bunch of rumors and allegations going around that he actually faked his death and he was still completely alive and well. And then that jump-started a second investigation to basically prove if this guy was even real or not. It's like trying to find out if Santa Claus exists. Keep in mind, by the way, before he died, he still had a warrant out for his arrest. So where did they find him? They found him all the way up in Scotland. And the most comedic thing about all of it is he wasn't spotted because of, like, you know, a wanted poster being outside the cinema, like that episode of The Simpsons where, like, Bart Simpson isn't allowed in. He was identified because he gave his real name over to the hospital when he was trying to get treated for COVID-19. On December 13th, 2021, Elevadene was arrested at Queen Elizabeth University Hospital, Glasgow, with regard to the alleged rape in Utah in 2008. Among other alleged crimes, he was receiving treatment for COVID-19 under the name Arthur Knight. Elevadene was identified by observation of his tattoos and his fingerprints, which matched police records for Rossi. Scarring on one arm suggested Elevadene had tried to remove one of the tattoos. I am actually amazed that this guy has the same tenacity as, like, DB Cooper, right? So he commits, like, a horrible sex crime, and then he goes on TV basically saying how, oh, he's got cancer and he's gonna die soon, you know, like KSI has cancer.
KSI has cancer. Do you want to win all the gift cards down below?
And then he died while there was still a warrant out for his arrest, only to be found years later hiding out in Scotland, and he basically self-reported by giving his details over to get treated for COVID. Also, scarring on his arm to remove a tattoo. Couldn't he have just gone to, like, any tattoo parlor? I'm pretty sure they don't take your details down. And the best thing about all of this, he didn't put his hands up, be like, you know, Walter White, you got me. He instead doubled down saying, no, that's a different person. Like I have a different name. That cannot be the same person as me, despite the fact that the tattoos match and the fingerprints match. On January 20th, 2022, after Elevadene missed his hearing in the Edinburgh Sheriff Court, he was arrested again in Glasgow, had his bail revoked, and was remanded into custody. The next day, he appeared in court being addressed as Arthur Knight by his lawyers. He further denied that he was Nicholas Rossi. He was again granted bail in early February 2022. 2022. Now, this dragged on and there was a lot of court hearings. Some of them he just chose to not show up for. I'm really not sure why. Now, he does have 2 separate court hearings for 2 different rapes, and they're also in 2 different states. So it gets very convoluted and very drawn out. Now, recently, there was a video posted of Rossi's preliminary hearing. And again, it is just incredibly painful because he is not even trying to be like, okay, I did that thing. I give up. You got me. No, he is doubling down that he is not the same person again, despite the fact that the tattoos match and the fingerprints match. Now, I've skimmed through the court proceedings and the entire thing. It just seems like an SNL bit. The woman defending him has like a mug that's got like a Bernie Sanders meme plastered on the side of it. And the prosecutor basically looks like someone pretending to look like Peter Griffin. Not exactly like Peter Griffin, but you know, you get those like impersonators that kind of look and sound like him like 70% of the way. It's kind of like that. There's also one point where Nicholas is writing down, you know, some long letter on his paper. I'm not sure whether he's taking notes or something like that. You know, a lot of people do that in the courtroom. I could also see it as like possibly a cry for help. You can even see the cameraman in the courtroom try to zoom in on what he's saying, but it's just completely unreadable. Now, one thing I find very interesting is Nicholas is still hooked up onto oxygen. Again, I don't know if it's real or not. I don't know whether it's like a bit or an act, that I don't really want to commit and say that it's all fake, because there is a chance, that a very small chance, I'm trying to be devil's advocate here, that the guy genuinely has to have assisted breathing. But one thing I did notice, which I find really telling, is like when he gets taken out of the courtroom, he purposely locks eyes with the camera just to make sure that he knows that this is going to be like recorded, this is going to be saved, this is going to be shared online. I find that very interesting as well. But again, I know I'm kind of going into that territory of like, you know, body language analysts, where it's like, oh, he looked to the left, he's lying. He looked to the right, he's analyzing, you know, just that kind of garbage. But also another important thing as well, I'm not sure whether he got a chance to, but Nicholas does not actually speak at all. The entire proceeding, he never speaks at any point. He does obviously speak to his counsel very quietly, but it's almost like he's kind of worried that the accent is going to break, so he's just not going to, you know, actually say anything out loud that could incriminate him further. I mean, even towards the end as well, when he's taken out the courtroom, you can see that he now has to use a wheelchair, which is something he didn't need to use before. But again, it's difficult because you're getting into that territory of like, your biases against how horrible someone's being is almost invalidating any, you know, genuine illnesses they might have. But again, that being said, to be like a triple devil's advocate here, it's difficult because he's been proven to lie, right? Like the tattoos and stuff. Okay, maybe in another reality, he just got the same tattoos and he looks the same. But when it comes down to things like fingerprints, it's basically near impossible to disprove, to the point that it basically is evidence that you can use. But yeah, this will definitely be like a developing story that still keeps going. I just found it funny how like the court proceedings itself, it was just such a joke. I think one way I want to end this video is by showing a clip of Nicholas Rossi speaking in a British accent, because his British accent is, it's not that it's bad, it is bad, okay? It's like asking an American to do a British accent.
What a lovely day it is today.
But it's more the fact how he uses like old English, like you'd use if you were like a 12-year-old Victorian chimney sweeper, like my lady, my lordship. And it's like, okay, you're not from Downton Abbey, bro. You're British.
Objection, my lady. That is complete hearsay, and I would ask your ladyship that the prosecution show cause for why they